Hey, John. John Donovan.
Hey, Marty Keller.
Good afternoon. Good to see
Good
you.
to see you. It's heat wave down here in San Diego. We're up to like 82.
Oh my gosh, how do you stand it?
I don't know. We're just like melting away.
Well, it's
I'm
kind of
melting.
interesting because we're having the opposite. It's cooling down here in Sacramento,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's quite actually quite beautiful here on. We're doing this recording, ladies and gentlemen, on Friday the 13th. So beware of whatever it is you hear today.
yeah.
So anyway, Marty Keller here, John Donovan in Oceanside, San Diego County, California, and we're here as always, to have another edition of the Accountability Practice podcast, Intentional Living. And what we focus on here is breaking the patterns of behavior that are vexing us. We find ourselves doing things that we say we don't want, and we keep repeating them. And we often find ourselves compelled, as if somebody's holding an invisible gun to our head, to do
Yep,
things that our conscious mind is saying, I don't want to do. So
exactly.
we're learning about what the source of that activity is, and what we can do to make something different happen in our lives. So that's the general purpose. We've been doing this podcast for 4 years. There's a whole library of information about the intentional living process that anybody wants on YouTube on our intentional living channel. So please feel free to browse in that library if there are topics that you might want to learn more about, or if there's something of interest to you, send me or John a note, and we'd be happy to discuss that. Um, One issue that we're going to talk about today is one of my favorite topics, which we don't discuss all that frequently, but it has to do with the general the general applicability of the accountability practice and the principles that undergird the practice. And
Hmm.
this came about. I was reminded of that. I was having a lunch today with a dear friend, and she started um, railing on about Donald Trump and Donald Trump's this, Donald Trump's that. And I said, are you getting some kind of charge from talking about Donald Trump?" And she clearly she was. She was very animated, and and this is somebody who's involved in our accountability practice, John. And I said, so uh, are you willing to consider the possibility that what you're feeling is a projection? And she looked at me like I had just switched into a foreign language and was introducing some brand new topic. And I said, well, my experience is that the things that we learn in the accountability practice about our subconscious behaviors and about compulsions and addictions and all those kinds of things are true in every single facet of our lives, and not just
Yeah.
necessarily in my relationship with my family or my spouse or my friends, but it's also in my relationship with my world. It's in my relationship with my fellow citizens. It's in my relationship
Hmm.
with entertainment. It's in my relationship with everything. And so if I'm feeling if I'm feeling a trigger, it doesn't matter what outside of me generates that trigger, that emotional
Hmm.
sense. And we did record a podcast on triggers not all that long ago for those of you that like to dig into that a little bit more. Um, but it's always about me. It's never about the other person. That's one of our
No.
principles.
Yeah.
And so I just thought I would bring that up and see if you have any comments or thoughts about that. Because I often find it a barrier to friends if we're not seeing eye to eye on political issues. The conversations often get emotional
Oh
very
my
quickly.
God. Yeah. And it's playing out in our society. People are getting divorced. Family members are estranging themselves from each other. Couples who are dating stop, and it's who are you going to vote for? And it's like it's over. Projections. Um, Somebody asked me one time, what percentage of my perceptions are projections? And, and I said 100%. 100% of what I see, I evaluate and associate according to what I know, which is what I know, me, and my perception of me in that. So everything I see, I filter through my experience up until this moment. So anything I can um, create a thought or concept about is something I have experience with or have created the concept or perception already. Um, I cannot see something, even if it's right in front of me, that I that I don't have a frame of reference for. There was a story in one of the things I used to watch, the name of it will come to me, where Columbus came to the Caribbeans and he rowed ashore and saw the Native Americans, and they said, "Where are you from? How'd you get here?" And he pointed to the boat, and he says, "I came from that boat." And they looked out there and they could see nothing. What boat? Because they didn't have a frame of reference to create that concept inside themselves. So the shaman went out to the ocean on the beach, kept looking out. He said, "There's something out. I don't know what he's talking about." Until he saw where the waves had a different fluctuation in the waves, and he looked and he looked and he looked, and finally the the ship came to view, but it took focus. He had to, like, what is it I'm not seeing? It has to be something. So he was focused, and then once he got enough information through see, hear, taste, through his sight, he could then perceive the boat, which had no place in his capacity to perceive, to stick to. I call that the frame of reference. When I came into 12-step recovery, my frame of reference was it's either my fault or their fault. I'm fucked up or they're messed up. So when everybody in ACA started talking about family of origin dysfunction, I had no idea what they were talking about. My family of origin was what my family of origin was and what I perceived it to be, which was pretty normal. I mean, the trauma in my family, I was like, I don't understand trauma. We had a pretty good childhood, is my thought. We only went hungry every once in a while. The utilities weren't shut off all the time. Dad wasn't screaming, yelling all the time. There's times he was like watching TV. So I don't know what you're talking about trauma. And then after I listened to these people talk about relationships with parents and things they said, I started building this frame of reference that trauma, complex post-traumatic stress, trauma, and then what I lived through was traumatic. But at first I had no frame of reference. And after about a year, my perception became, holy cow, I was raised, born and raised in a concentration camp environment. I could not escape. I was held hostage. I was subjected to emotional, physical, and uh, verbal abuse between both parents consistently. And my perception was that's how parents communicate. That's communication. So when you talk about, being violent in their communication, I don't know what you're talking about until I built up this frame of reference. Now, projections also will tell me if I've worked through a problem. If somebody in my life lies to me and I go, oh, that person's not honest, I'm going to move to safety, or I'm going to move away from them, or I'm not going to engage them. And I move and I'm proactive in my life. Still a projection, liar, dishonest, but it's not triggering me because I've owned my dishonesty. I've owned my capacity to lie. When I first got into recovery, one of my what do you call it, demands, or if you did this, it's no more. We're all over. If you lied to me, I'm done. I'm done with you, because I couldn't handle people that lied, because I'm honest. I'm an honest individual. Um, and so lying became this trigger. Oh, you lied to me. You did this. You did that, and I would engage and lose my center. That's what a trigger is. I lose my center. If I'm not triggered, then whatever I'm perceiving, I'm either being compassionate about it, being looking out for my own best interest, which is what I've learned to do, is to look after my own well-being. Do I want to put energy into somebody who is dishonest with me consistently? I can. I choose not to anymore. Before my recovery, I would have to convince them they were lying. I would have to make them say and validate what I felt, that they were liars. And it turned out to be a blowout, relationship breaker, friendship destroyer. And now it's something, it's a point of conversation. What you're telling me, it isn't true. Do you really believe, depending on the relationship, if it's my daughters or somebody who's close to me, I'm going to say, well, that didn't sound right, because I'm vested in the relationship. So I put energy into the relationship. If it's somebody walking down the street, or somebody I saw at work, and they're okay, I'll just go someplace else. I don't need to be around this. I'm centered. So the benefit of owning a projection, which is 100%, if I get triggered, and out of the concern for my own well-being, or inclusiveness of the people around me, that's what compassion is, and concern, discerning, and detached. My Instead of reacting, I'm proactive, and I'm still centered in my life. So everything's a projection. The ones that are helpful to me are the ones I have high energy about, because that tells me there's something in my subconscious that's holding this, what I'm projecting on the other person, on myself, below my awareness, which causes the discord in me and inability to connect to people that I want to say, people I say I love, inability to be intimate. There's a block, there's a wall there, and it's in that unresolved childhood trauma. So if I see somebody who is dishonest, and it's say the event that we're at is a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10, and I stay at 5, and I address in a compassionate, sometimes not calm, depending, it could be 5, 6, 7. That's not really calm, but it's still addressing at the level it's coming to me. If I go up, it's a 5, and I'm at 8, 9. That's an issue in me, unresolved childhood trauma, complex post-traumatic stress, that I'm holding on myself, projecting onto the other person, thinking it's them, and not seeing my capacity for the same type of behavior. And I'm real familiar with my capacity to be dishonest. I mean, once I got this, I could bring up memories that I would lie just to be lying, just to start trouble, for out of resentment, bitterness, or just some entitlement or arrogance, which are all things I've owned, because I've seen, oh, that person's arrogant, oh, that person's entitled. No, wait a minute, I'm arrogant. It's like, once I get it, it's like a no-brainer. Of course I'm arrogant. Based on where I came from, arrogance is a good tool to keep people away. And as a child, they hurt you. So my behavior that I developed to stay safe, or to stay safe, was this arrogance that kept people away from me. So I talk to people about projections, and they'll try to come up with some scenario where it doesn't fit them. In the jail, the big one was child molester. And I say, okay, I want you to consider that there's something in there. And this
So,
is high energy.
so let me just check in. So you're talking about someone in the jail would call someone else a child molester.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Got it.
That was like badge of honor, a medal of honor to mess up somebody who was a child molester. And I'm talking major mayhem or killing.
Right.
It was like everybody. This is what we do. So they would say child molester. I'm not a child molester, and I would say, if you're willing, let's look at it. What might be in your subconscious? I'm not calling you a child molester. I'm just saying that there's something inside you that projects out there, and child molesters are 6, 7, okay, but they're going to 10, okay, and they're doing destruction. They're violent behavior, which puts them in peril. Which they may be in jail or prison for 5 years. That act happens, and they're in there for the rest of their lives. So it's high stakes kind of thing. So I say something like, "Do you have children?" And they would say yes or no, whatever. And if they had children, I would just say, where the hell are they? I see where you're at. And whatever choice you made to estrange yourself from your children, would you not call that some type of molestation, whether it's emotional, spiritual? We're knowing it's not physical, but you can see how your own self-hate of yourself for putting yourself in a situation estranged from your children. You don't know who they're with right now, nor do you have any power to protect them. Nice deep breath. And I want to say 90% of the time they would like, oh my God, John, oh my God, John. And then own, I am abusive towards my own children. That's what molestation is. It's sexual abuse, but it's abuse. Maybe they're not sexually abusive, they're abusive. Or I was raised in a household where I was incested, I was abused, and out of their, and they, I intend to heal, I intend to be compassionate, I intend, whatever the intent came out of them. The projection doesn't have to be one for one, but there's something in that behavior that you're projecting and creating this picture of child molester, and then going into this high intensity to address it, make it not so, make it wrong, make it heinous, that there's something in you. Now, are child molesters dangerous, and do we want to keep them away from our children? Yes, yes. I'm not saying not to do that. I am saying the way we're addressing the issue of child molestation creates the atmosphere for continued child abuse without anybody taking accountability. So, well, I want to own that and disclose that I had issues with child molesters, and I did this myself. I'm a child, and I just said it. I'm a child molester. And then it's just like, oh my God, I abandoned my children. I, their mothers, their mother got married. I don't know the guy. It's like, I don't know. I abdicated. Okay. That created a lot of discord inside me because I'm thinking, I'm trying to tell her, but I'm a nice guy. No, nice guys don't abandon their children. Nice deep breath. I abandon my children. Nice deep breath. I intend to be a loving, caring, nurturing father, which now, after 36 years of doing this, both of my adult girls love me. have forgiven me for the abandonment and are themselves self-actualized, taking on their life. And we've healed that between us. And it happened because I owned my capacity for child abuse, which I didn't even know I was doing at the time. At the time, I was just leaving their mom. I was like, I was justified by leaving the house. I had no idea that I was leaving 2 children behind too. In fact, that thought came to me 5 years into my recovery, because my absence from that family and my recovery started at the same time. I was sitting in a group, and we were talking about childhood dysfunction, and I thought, oh my God, oh my God, I left them. And it just hit me. It just like a ton of bricks. I intend to forgive myself. I intend to heal. I intend to be there for my children. I intend to be a loving, caring, nurturing father. And in the process of over a period of time, that's manifested. And the good news is, one of my daughters has a grandson who is the beneficiary of my healing and his mother's healing and his aunt's healing. And it's just beautiful and tragic all at the same time. So, yeah, projections, it's a hard pill to swallow, that everything I see is a reflection of me somehow, some way. And the things I have the biggest resentment, the biggest need to stomp out, is what's really inside me, eating me from the inside out.
So I have an inquiry about that.
Okay.
So I get it, and it's my experience as well. Um, is it the case that that which I'm seeing out there, and I'm having this 7, 8, 9, 10 emotional response to, is it
Mm-hmm.
is it because that is who I am, or is that because I have a belief that's who I am and I can't abide it
Correct.
consciously?
It's the belief. It's a it's it's you becoming the behaviors that you exemplify. And that's what I learned as a child. You're a burden. When you did that, I felt. How come you do that? You're making
Right,
us harder. Um, or if I would be upset about something, how come you're upset? We work all day long so you can be happy. How come you're not happy? So I thought I had my behavior. If I changed my behavior, they would be okay. So I equated I am my behaviors.
right.
And that's a subconscious, subtle hook that made me strive to do good, and then block the things that were not good, deny, minimize, blame those behaviors. Oh, I wouldn't have done that unless they would have. If they hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have done that, because I'm a nice.
Right.
Part of the meetings that we do is that we identify an authentic self. We identify the essence of who we are. And there's a sheet of paper where people have, there's 35 essence words, like loving, kind, trustworthy, worthy, spiritual. And then we have the people pick three or four of those words and then put them in the statement, in the sentence, I am and my 3 words are gentle, loving, empowering man. So that we can begin to see that behaviors coming from trauma are simply that, survival behaviors. Now, and we can all equate this to a dog. Say we walking down the street and a dog has a broken leg, and we don't call the dog an asshole. We don't call it a mean dog because it's barking at us, snapping at us. We see that the dog is wounded. Some people rush in there and try to help the dog and they get bit. Well, They don't blame the dog for biting them because the dog has a broken leg. So they take the measures they need to address the problem proactively instead of reactively and keep themselves safe while they're assisting the wounded animal. I would like to say, based on childhood trauma, that we're all wounded in some way, and yet we treat each other as you're that behavior, you're arrogant. So that means you, me, John Donovan, arrogant, I'm screwed. I'm arrogant. That's a qualification for being ostracized. So I don't want to be ostracized. So I'll blame the arrogance on something. It wasn't me, or you didn't really look at them because you want to see arrogance. You just, it's over there. I'm trying to fix stuff, and you're calling me. I wouldn't be able to even handle, because that meant I would be separated from. And it was true in my childhood. If I didn't stop my emotional growth, emotional regulation, and believe that I was the burden, um, I could then be active in helping them. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but me changing my behaviors gave me the reality that I had power. My behaviors had power to affect other people. Now, my behaviors impact other people. I'm not saying it doesn't. If I do something violent, that there's a major impact. The people choose their response. And that's a hard, I choose my response to somebody I see who's dishonest. I choose it. I either choose to engage with it, try to fix it, or I choose to keep myself safe, move away from it, or somewhere in between. That's all proactive for my well-being. And depending on who the person is, it could be, if it's an intimate relationship, it depends on how they go out to casual acquaintances, how much I want to invest in this dialogue and reconciliation or clarity about what I heard and what you're doing and how we're communicating. Hopefully that made more sense.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time together, but before we go, I want to emphasize, and maybe you want to speak up here too. I want to emphasize, particularly to the person who might be hearing this material for the first time, that the willingness to identify that experience of, or that belief about myself that I've hidden so deeply into my subconscious. Jung called it the shadow. I mean, it's the shadow
Yes.
means there's no light there. I can't see it.
Right.
So but I can see it when I project it outward onto someone else, and that
Yes.
is that I've got an emotional response that's disproportionate to what's actually in front of me. Um, the thing I want to emphasize here is that there's nothing wrong with this. This is normal. John said,
Yeah.
you said at the top of the conversation, we're always projecting.
Yes.
What I find, I know of myself, I've shared this before in the podcast, that the first time I sat with you in a group and I said something that you asked me to consider as a projection, I didn't want to. I could feel a voice in my mind saying, "Don't go there because to own that you're, let's say, arrogant is shameful." And
Yes. Yep.
it's something shameful. Well, it turns out that's why I couldn't see it in the first place, because
Mm-hmm.
it was so shameful that if I owned it, I would be less than, or I might even be abandoned, kicked out, uh, left behind, all those kinds of things.
And as a child, that's hooked into survival.
But you can't
Yeah.
agree to do that as a child.
Yeah. No. 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 You
So
would
when we
die.
get so when we get to adulthood and we learn these processes for identifying our inner hidden beliefs about ourselves that show up out there. Donald Trump
Mm-hmm.
is so and so. We're we're suggesting that there's nothing wrong with what it is what we're discovering about ourselves.
Correct.
In fact, there's great power in this, and it took me a while because when you see John's diagram of the accountability tree, which is just the outline of the way we do this process, at the very top it says no blame, no judgment. And so I had to learn. It took me a long time to actually learn the practical adoption of a belief in no blame, no judgment, that I
Yeah.
could own my arrogance. And here's the thing: when I initially owned my arrogance, I was triggered.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
now I can own it and go, okay, well, that's just the way. This is the way I am. Like, what
Yeah.
do I and what do I want? How do I want to be in
Right.
this moment?
Right.
In our recovery, the elements that we struggle with that showed up as these defense mechanisms and still are there, um, they have a long life because they were among the very first psychological mechanisms that we developed. And
Correct.
so, and oftentimes our brains, our neurology form themselves to protect these mechanisms.
Yes.
So here I am, about to turn 73, and I think you got a birthday coming up here any day, or did
Yeah,
you
I
already?
do.
Yeah. So here we are,
Um,
turning
yeah.
another year on the
Number.
calendar of our lives, and that stuff's still there.
Yes.
Only this time, it's like we're just willing to accept it. It's just the way I am,
Hmm.
and when I notice via the mechanism of projection that I'm behaving in a certain way, because I can now notice it without making myself wrong, I now
Yep.
have choice as to what I want to do about it.
Correct. Yes.
And
Yeah.
and what we do here in the accountability practice is, we take the feeling into our awareness. How do I feel when I own that uh, I'm what I call that I'm what I call Donald Trump,
Right.
and just feel it, and use that feeling to be the
Hmm.
occasion of asking myself if that's what I want. And if it's not what I want, then I get to say what I want instead,
Yeah.
and then state that in the form of an intention. I intend to be at peace with myself. I intend to be loving, kind, and nurturing to myself.
Hmm.
And so it turns out that these projections have great value to us once we figure out the trick of what our minds have been doing all these years.
Yeah. I remember one time you asked me how I was doing, and I said, I'm reveling in my character defects.
Right.
You go, but this is why. Because if I spot a character defect, I can take it to the address it, heal it, and then move into proactive. I'm mean. Character defect. Okay. Oh wow. I'm mean. I intend to be kind, which is where the transmutation of the trauma happens, and I find myself moving towards kindness and exemplifying what kindness is.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Exactly. Well, John, our time is up. So again, thank you for helping us understand ourselves better and
you're
what
welcome.
leads to these sometimes compulsive behaviors. So projection is a key element in our psychological recovery as we begin to understand that this mechanism is part of a defense, a
Yep.
psychological defense, and it has information for us if we learn how to discern and interpret what's happening. And if you'd like to experience this, we do this in a group setting. We have 4 Zoom meetings a week, so they're available to anybody who'd like to come and participate. The information on how to do that will be at the end of the podcast. Please, you're invited. We'd love to have you join us and explore these things in person. So with that, we're going to wrap up, and I thank John for another insightful podcast.
Thank you, Marty. Yes.
And happy birthday.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.